Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Joe Burget's here from Burget and Associates from the Bloomfield, Perry County. He's been someone I've worked with. He's helped out a lot of real estate agents. Mike knows who he is. I think some other people said they've met him before and known. So he gets around a good bit with the townships and surveying. So I'm going to turn it over to him. He has a lot of information to go over. Everyone that's online, I'm probably going to put you on mute if you have a question or something. If you put it in the chat or unmute yourself, but in the meantime, just keep yourself muted so that doesn't interrupt the presentation. So, Joe.
Good afternoon. Like Chris said, my name is Joe Burget. I'm a licensed surveyor, licensed since 2003. We have an office in New Bloomfield, which is Perry County. We do surveys within about 2 hours from Perry County. We'll go out to Selinsgrove, Newark, Lancaster, pretty far. You almost have to do that to keep busy. So what we have here this afternoon is we have a couple of things to go through. Looks like I've got about an hour and a half here. Got a bunch of slides. I probably have too much in here to go through, but we're going to try to go through as fast as I can. And at the end, if you have a question, just let me know. Basically, what is a surveyor? What do we do to do a survey? That's how we'll get started. Nowadays, almost every county has a nice little tax parcel map viewer that you can get on and look at parcel viewers. I put Cumberland County in here because this is where we're at. So slide number 2 is the Cumberland County tax parcel. At the top left-hand corner, you can see the web page. It's a very nice tool for tax purposes. You can get owners' names, deed book references, approximate lot acreages. And then slide number 3 is a blow up of actually the parcel that we're actually here today. And you can get an example on the left-hand side there. It's got the tax parcel number. The owner's name is 3T Investors LP. It's got the address. It's got the plan book page, which is a subdivision reference of how this lot was created. And then subdivision recording information, which says plan book 84, page 109. It's got the deed book page and the acreages and the municipality. So it's a really nice tool. Probably about 20 surveys a year. I get calls from people saying that my neighbor's shed's on my property because the tax map shows it. And actually, so this does drum up business for us, which is okay. But unfortunately, when I get the survey and it doesn't, then they're mad at me because it doesn't match the tax parcel number. So just understand, this is just a representation of where the property is for tax purposes. It's a very good source for finding deeds. This is exactly what we do. Is we come into this program and we'll get all the deed book references for all the neighbors, and we will plot their deeds. And in fact, if you look at the next page, it's called Landex. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Landex, but it's basically you have to subscribe to this. You charged basically per minute that you're on there. So as you can see, this is my current list, but there's a longer list there. So with all these counties, I can go on and pull a current deed anytime, 24 hours a day. I'm paying for it, but it's a lot less money than driving to the county courthouse and doing that. So what we do is use a tax mapper. We get all the deed book references for all the neighboring properties. We go to Landex, we pull their deeds. Slide 5 is a deed, sample deed. And then 6 is the subdivision plan. And this was the plan book 84 that was referenced on the tax mapper. And you can see on this, on the left or the right-hand side is the recording information. Plan book 84, page 109. That's where this plan is recorded at the Cumberland County Courthouse. In the front middle, on the bottom, this is the final township signatures, and then the owner signature. So when you have an official recorded plan, you're going to have all those signatures on it. If you don't see all the signatures, it's not an official plan of record. It might be something that was preliminary, just wasn't finalized. And if you have something without signatures, don't hold gospel, because it may not be the current plan. So always look for the signatures. And the next slide 7 is just what I said earlier, is a deed mosaic. So this is what we do, is we plot all the deeds and we look at all the deeds what they call for. So if you look here, I actually have referenced corners to look for. So when I plot a deed and it says for an iron pin, I'll actually draw this up in the office and say iron pin. So when my field crew goes out to the job site, this is what they're taking. They're not taking 25 deeds and reading through them at the job site. They're taking this, and then they're going around and saying, okay, the deed calls for a pin here. Can I find it? And down here at the bottom, it called for a stone. So we're looking for a stone there. It might be a pin that was set after the fact, but that was an original stone. So this is just more of a history of the deeds. So when we go to the job site, we know what we're looking for. And then, so my crew will go out to the job site, they'll look for all this information, collect, survey it, and then they'll email it back to me at the office. And I'll look at it, we'll resolve it, and then we'll set the pins that day when we're out there. So, and then we'll actually send them a survey map after we're done, which will be signed and sealed by myself. So that's the surveying end of it. Surveyors do a lot of work with municipalities. So if somebody wants to take a 10-acre parcel, cut it up into pieces, they have to hire a surveyor or engineer that knows the municipality rules and regulations, and he has to put a plan together based on the rules and regs and go to the township meetings, so forth. So what number 8 is an overall tax map of North Middleton Township. So what is a tax map? So basically it's the township adopts zoning. This is the zoning map, sorry. They adopt zoning, and all these different colors represent what people can do within those different colors. So down on the bottom left, there's a legend. And on the next page is more of a blow up of that says, okay, well, in green, it's rural resource. Yellow is low to medium density. Orange is medium to high density. Pink is village. So what you would do is you go to the zoning book. If your property fell into R1, which is typically a medium, it's probably a low to medium density yellow. So if it fell into that, you would look up that zoning district in the zoning book, and then you would see what you're allowed to do. So if you go to image 10, this is what you're going to see in the zoning book. So you're in R1. These on the left-hand side is a list of uses. So agricultural use, the X is a permitted by right, which means you're allowed to do that without any special permission. The middle column there says special exception. So if you come down through and you see an X for bed and breakfast, see bed and breakfast, you can only do a bed and breakfast if you get a special exception approval. What that means is you would have to go through the zoning hearing board, get special permission to do that. If you come down through, there's communication antennas and equipment. That X is over under conditional use. That conditional use is a special permission by the board of supervisors. So those are two different organizations. You got the zoning hearing board and you got the supervisors. So you just have to get special permission. So hopefully you fall underneath by right, so you don't have to get a special permission by anybody to do it. So all those X's under right, you'd be able to just go apply for a building permit and typically just go ahead and do that. But you have to get building permits and stormwater plans and all that. But then the next page on number 11, so if you have a commercial site, this is important because if you have a commercial site and an owner that wants to develop the property commercially, parking usually takes up a lot of space on the property. We were actually just looking at a property with Tavia a couple weeks ago in Carlisle, pretty small lot. But you can see here under the different types of uses. So if you scroll down through the use on the left, laundry and dry cleaning, you need one parking space per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area of the building. And it just sort of just tells you what you need to do there. So, so whenever you're laying out and trying to figure out if the lot's big enough, you need to know if you need 100 spaces, 200 spaces, or 20 spaces. And this is all within the zoning district, in the zoning books.
Is this available online?
It is. Yeah, a lot of them are. Yeah, most. That's correct. If you go to North Middleton and you type and just Google zoning.
Normally just call
Yeah, but mostly it is online. We're doing a lot of solar work right now, and that's all over the state. And when you go north, like into Tioga counties, there's people aren't there full time. So those you don't have them online, and you can't really access them unless you go to buy the book make a copy of it. So, and number 12, slide 12 is uses. And if you're creating a lot, how big does that lot have to be, and what the size of your setbacks for that lot? So if you have a vacant lot and you want to build a home in R1 district, you would look up residential on the left-hand side, and it says no public water and no public sewer. Your minimum lot size is 43,560, which is an acre. Your minimum lot width is 150 at the setback line, 120 in frontage. Lot impervious coverage is 20%. So those are things that you need to look at as a designer laying out the lots, especially the 150 lot width and your setbacks. If I have a big building, the client wants to put a pole barn in there and big building, and you may need a larger lot because of the setback. To fit all the buildings on there. Next section we're going to talk about is flooding. You guys probably deal with this a lot, with a mortgage, flood insurances, and all that kind of stuff. So what we do is we do a lot of FEMA work. If you go into Google and you type in FEMA map service center, and you can bring this FEMA website up and type in the address, it pulls you right into the FEMA maps. And this slide 13 is the cover page basically, and you went in and type in the address. Slide 14 is I'm going to explain to you a little bit about the two different zones. We get a lot of calls from realtors and homeowners saying, I want a flood cert, elevation certificate. I need one. So you have to understand you cannot always do one. So this map here was actually a pretty good map. If you look at map slide 14, on the bottom right hand side, I have it called detailed study. See actual flood elevation. So what that means is that stream down through there, FEMA had hired somebody to study the stream and determine the exact flood elevations within that stream. And if you look, you'll see a 4.6, 410, 410.4, 410. See those numbers that go across perpendicular to the stream? That's the true elevation when it floods at 100-year flood elevation. At that location, that's above sea level, where the water will come up to. So a surveyor will come out, he would tie into a local benchmark, he would establish where that 410 elevation is on that property, and then compare that to the structure. And if the structure was at 412, 413, 414, it's above, great. But if it was at 407, 406, below the floodplain, that's a problem. Okay, so an elevation certificate can be completed at this situation because the true 100-year elevations are listed on the FEMA map. So the surveyor just compares it, the elevation of the FEMA map to the elevations of the house. That's what a certificate is all about. And if you look at 15, slide 15, I'll come back to 14. If you look at slide 15, this is the actual elevation certificate. Copy of it. Where I have it outlined, it says, what is the base flood elevation? Well, that would be right off that FEMA map. Right there's the elevation. So I would fill that out. And then you go to slide 16. Underneath C2, A through H, I have highlighted. It says, what's the bottom floor elevation? What's the next highest floor elevation? What's the bottom of the lowest horizontal structure member? So those things I need to fill out as a surveyor, and I would stamp this. And then this would get sent into the insurance company, and they would compare all of those elevations and calculate what the flood insurance would be or wouldn't be. So that's in a zone AE. Okay, so that's what a zone AE is. I always say it's an engineered study. It's zone AE, which E is for engineered study. So you can do a certificate in that situation. You look at the top of this flood map on slide 14, it says zone A. Do you see where it says limit of study? Zone A. See that on that map? Mm-hmm. That limit of study means that's the end of the engineered study. Now it's going into a zone A, which is an approximation from FEMA with no elevations listed on the FEMA. 0. So now it's an approximation, and you see that in a lot of more rural areas. Perry County, out in Blaine, nobody studied those streams. Now, there's some of them, like Sherman's Creek was studied, but a lot of the smaller ones, there's zone A. So they call us and they say, I need an elevation certificate. Well, there's no elevation listed on the map. So I can't put that on the survey. So there's different ways of actually going through the process to get FEMA to make an evaluation on it. But so if you, that's the biggest thing you need to look at is on a FEMA map, if it's an AE, you can do an elevation certificate. But if you call a surveyor, typically they're going to say, no, we can't do one if you're in a zone A. Okay. We'll do these pretty quick.
You're gonna run out of time or run out of material.
So then the next thing that I was asked to look at here too was ALTA surveys. ALTA surveys are an American Land Title Association where if you have a title company, a lot of them are commercial sites where you have title insurance. The title company is not going to want a certified title until an ALTA survey is actually completed by a licensed surveyor. So just so you understand what's the difference. Basically, boundary survey, property survey is just going out, where's the property lines? Give me a map, show me where the property lines, set the property corners, mark the lines, done. Just a private agreement between the homeowner and us to show them where the property lines are. Now, with an ALTA survey, the title company has to provide the surveyor with a little bit of direction of what they want on that ALTA survey. So how do they do that? Well, there's a list of table A items. So list number 17 slide and number 18 slide is a list of the table A items for an ALTA survey, items 1 through 20. So what would happen is the surveyor would immediately tell you, or whoever's requesting it, check off what items you want us to include in this ALTA survey. You know, there's some things in here are contour data. Sometimes they want them, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they want zoning information, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they want wetland studies, sometimes they don't. So the price to do a survey, ALTA survey with everything checked is a lot more than if only 2 or 3 things are checked on here. So anytime I get a call for a quote, I always ask them, please provide the list of table A items so I know what I need to do for the ALTA survey. So the ALTA, and that's just the list. Now there's the, you guys probably looked through title commitments before, but underneath these title commitment, the title search. So usually it's a pretty big stack of stuff that the title company prepares. Underneath it, within that search, there's a section, it's a Schedule B Part 2. Schedule B Part 2. So that would be slide 19 and 20. This is the only section of that title commitment that really applies to us because the title company has listed in this all the exceptions that they found. Like if there was a right of way for PPL, if there was a water line easement going through the property, anything. It's my job as a surveyor to take that list of those encroachments that the title company has found in their cert and put it on the survey. So that's all I have to do. So I just take this list, items 1 through 22, and I have to make a map that shows on the map where items 1 through 22 are. Okay, so these are pretty small versions, but item number 20 on sheet 21, slide 21, Chris. Okay.
Well, this is where I have to bear with me here. I have to
It's okay.
get rid of some of these other
You're
ones.
on
I gotta close some of these other ones.
Right.
Okay.
my 21.
I don't know if it's gonna share. I don't think it's gonna share it though.
Isn't it?
No,
Well,
because it's a PDF. It won't let me.
okay. Well, this is just a cover page for the survey. On the left-hand side is a pretty long list of things here. What that list is a list of those 1 through 22 items. And then my response to every one of these. Some of them are like paid taxes. That's not a survey item. So I just write on my survey map, not a survey item. But then when it comes down to there's a right of way, then I have to show it. So if you go to slide 22, which is the actual survey,
It's up, they got it.
you can see these like circles with numbers in them, like 21, 22. What I'm doing there is those circles represent the number on the cover page that says item 22 is right here. This is where the PP&L right away is. And then the title company gets a copy of this and they make sure everything looks good. The attorneys look through it, make sure that there's no problems for the person that they're insuring the title to. But that's what an Alta survey is. It's just basically title company does a title search, has a big long list of exceptions, and the surveyor needs to put a plan, graphical representation, so someone can actually see it where all these items are. Because it's sometimes hard to read a right-of-way agreement and know exactly where without having a plan. So that's really what an Alta survey is. Slide 23.
Can I ask you the cost delta between an Alta and a regular survey?
Yeah, I mean, a regular survey, typically, if it's a typical 2-acre lot or less in a development, we charge about $900 to do a survey. And that's just a boundary survey. It's not doing a title search. It's not looking for easements on the property. It's me coming out and showing you where your lot lines are and giving you a certified map showing that. An Alta survey, it's very hard to give you an idea on the cost because of how many table A items are included. Is the property a 3-acre lot versus a 25-acre lot? They can range from $2,500 to $5,500. So that's just to give you an idea.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Number 23. So this is just basically me pointing out to you guys when you're out walking a piece of property, and there's a pin right there, and there's a pin right there, and there's a pin right there, and it looks like it lines up with what their use lines are. It's you could basically misinterpret what you're seeing. So this map here on slide 23 shows 2 pins on this subdivision plan that could be placed on the property. So one is the actual property corner, which would be the northwest corner of lot 27. The other one that I have flagged there is actually the starting point of the curve of that street. Sometimes they're only 3 to 4 feet apart. Okay, so what I'm saying is if you go out, you could be looking at the one that's the right-of-way corner, not the actual property corner. And you could say, well, there's, I think, that's what the owner said the property line was. And maybe they just say, I know there's a pin here, but didn't understand that there could have been another one 5 or 6 feet away. Now we've just told that person something. Now they apply for a building permit or fence permit to put a fence up. And they thought that the right-of-way corner was that, or they thought that was the corner. They put the fence there, and so it just, and which it could have been is lot 26, and now they just put the fence from the right-of-way corner down to their back right corner. Now they're crossing the property line of the neighbor. So we had another situation in Perry County where there was a lot being transferred. They wanted to know where the corner was, and I gave them a price to survey it, which I always do. And they said, we just want you to come out with a metal detector and find the corner. Well, that's what they've always want, and I say, well, I don't do that, because if I go out there and just find a pin without measuring, then I may have misled somebody, and that's not what I want to do. So anybody can go out and put 2 pins at 100 feet apart, and are they actually positioned on the correct spot? I don't know. But in Perry County, we gave a price to. I told them I'm not going to do that. So they did find another person to do it. They came out with a metal detector, marked them up, and then the new buyer put a fence up, not knowing that there was 10 feet of that property conveyed to the neighbor 3 years prior, and now they just put the fence 10 feet over on the neighbor's property because somebody just took a metal detector out and said, "There's your corner, there's your corner." Didn't measure anything. So it's not a good practice, and we don't get into that. Tell all my guys, we're not doing that. Yeah, it's just, so. So we have number 24, and this is just a typical plat, survey plat that we would do for the $900. Shows the property corners, the iron pins that we set. In fact, this job here was just done not too long ago for a client in Hershey. He's a builder, and the way stormwater requirements are nowadays, a lot of people are trying to find ways of not doing stormwater control, stormwater designs when they go to apply for a building permit. So he wanted us to survey the existing features on this lot. He wanted to take everything completely off and build new. So what we did is we actually surveyed everything to get a recordation of what the impervious coverage was then. And then we removed it all. And he designed his house, designed a garage, put it there. And then we submitted a proposed scenario to the township. Now they had an existing and a proposed, and they could see we weren't adding any additional, and he was able to do it without any stormwater requirements. So when you have these little lots in Hershey like this, it's kind of hard to do stormwater on some of these things. So surveyors, property lines, we do a lot of stuff with property lines. That's our job 99% of the time. But there are certain situations where there's easements. You know, what is an easement? Well, if you have a neighbor and you want to put a garden up, but you don't have no large enough lot, maybe he'll let you do that. So what you could do is get special permission from your neighbor to put an easement and use part of his ground, and you could get an easement from him. And the example number 25 was the property to the north had very limited access to it, almost a landlocked piece of ground. And what we were trying to do was acquire an easement from the Penn State so he could come off of a driveway and come into his lot a different manner. So he wasn't buying the land, he was going to buy a right to utilize the land as an easement and right of way. So there is liability issues with that, obviously, because you're using somebody else's ground and the person that owns it has more of a liability issue of somebody using it. But that's, so we do easements as well. A lot of people will call us and say, you know, I want to move my property line 5 feet so I could utilize this or that. And by the time you honestly get the survey done by moving a property line 5 feet, you got a survey cost, subdivision cost, township fees, township engineering fees, county fees. You're spending $7,000 to do all that, and you're paying the guy $1,500 for the 5-foot property. You know, so it's a lot of work to move property lines. And so sometimes you just get an easement to utilize, and that's the cheapest route to go. So sometimes it's not the smartest and the best way, but sometimes it works.
I have a question.
Sure.
So you get an easement and then you sell your property. That easement stands.
If you,
Correct.
yeah, well, what you do when you get that easement, you have an agreement with the neighbors. You guys are getting together and you're talking about the easement. There's an easement agreement that gets attached to that easement. So
Right.
what you saw there was just a plat showing where on the earth that easement was.
Right.
You should always have a legal agreement that's signed by both parties. In that agreement, it says what you have the right to do. You want to install sewer, you want to put water, you want to do, what's your specific purpose of the easement? It's got to be in there. And then you can put in there that's for you only, or for everybody after, for your heirs and the signs.
Okay.
You can put that in there, that it's going to continue, or you can put in there that it stops whenever you sell your property. So
Okay.
that's just in the agreement, you
Yeah.
spell that out.
Yeah, okay. And that was an option.
Yeah.
Kind of thought it just went with it.
Not
Like as
all-
part of the deed.
Yeah, not always,
Okay.
not always.
Okay.
And a lot of times they don't even do that agreement. You know, you and your neighbor just say, not a problem,
Right.
you know, and then what happens is next buyer comes in and he sees a little driveway there.
Yep.
And he thought, you know, he thinks he can use it, but that driveway was only
Right.
your agreement with the neighbor, not them, so. Number 26, this is something that basically I'm just making notes of things that I've seen in the past and things that have come up. I think I may even said something about some of these here. So things that a realtor should really know, in my mind. Number one, showing the showing property corners and saying that is the corner. It's not always the case, like I said earlier. Anybody can put a pin in the ground. I've gone to properties already, did surveys, and the neighbor comes up and says, oh yeah, I put that in. Yeah, I put that corner in there. Well, surveyors, I don't know the history of what all went on there the last 100 years. I'm assuming that that pin's right. And the deed says to an iron pin. Well, legally, that pin, if a judge might say that pin's there, that's what calls for the deed, that's the corner. But nobody knew that the neighbor just went out and pounded that pin in the ground illegally. So by doing that, it's actually jeopardizing things that could happen in the future, like another surveyor company trying to determine. Surveyors got to look at the evidence, and by seeing a pin, I would think it probably was set by a surveyor, unless somebody tells me otherwise. But yeah, anybody can set them, and I have seen people pull them and move them over. A lot of times. Number two, tell the homeowners that they get 5 lots based on the township zoning requirements. So we had a situation, Silver Spring Township, the owner had 5 or 6 acres of ground. Somebody calculated the lot size, looked at the zoning requirements, said, oh, 1.5 acres times this, you can get four lots in there, easy. Well, it was steep. They couldn't get septic testing approved on it. So this person bought that thinking that she was getting 4 lots. So she paid this dollar amount because she thought she's getting 4 lots. Now she calls a surveyor, which I'm always the bearer of the bad news. So I always told her, I said, I'm sorry, you're not going to get that. Well, they always said I could. I'm sorry. Do the homework with some of it up front, but she got 3 lots, out of it because the septic testing wasn't there, bad soils, slopes, right of ways, lot frontages. It was just a lot of stuff that she couldn't get it, but she paid the money to get it, but she unfortunately couldn't. Number 3, the lawn owner has the right to utilize an existing lane that is not on their property. So again, me and my neighbor, I want to get around my property line and get to my back shed. He says, you go right ahead, not a problem, as long as you own this, go right ahead. Now, somebody buys my property, looks at it and says, no, I can get around my shed easily because there's a lane. Settlement happens 3 weeks later, they start to drive around the back. Neighbor approaches them and says, you can't do that. Why? Because that was a private agreement between me and the owner. Do you have anything legally written in writing? They said no. But now they don't have any way to get there. They're going through their yard, stuff like that. So just don't always assume that there's a right of way for something and tell somebody that. This one here, we could probably talk a little bit more about. It's very, very important. Clean and green. A lot of people don't understand it. What it is if you have 10 acres or more of land and you want to have tax breaks, get breaks on your taxes, you can apply for this, be in this program. You can have a house on it. It's got to meet certain use requirements, agricultural, forest. But you can get in the program, but there's a list of rules that you have to abide by. And those rules are pretty much pertaining to selling land away from it. Okay, so if the Clean and Green application has, let's say, 100 acres, that's all enrolled in the program. So every year they're getting tax breaks on that 100 acres. Well, you are only allowed to take off 2 acres per calendar year. Now, when it comes out, it's coming out of the program. So the program's losing 2 acres of ground in the program. So you're paying rollback on that 2 acres because the program's losing it for 7 years. For the last 7 years, tax office will calculate the rollback and send the person that conveyed the lot a bill for that 7 years of rollback on that 2 acres. And everybody calls me and says, 2 acres, yeah, we can do 2 acres, no problem. But they forget the 10% rule. You can only go up to 10%. You can't just, if you have 100 acres, you can't do up to 98 and have 2 acres left. That ain't happening. 10 acres is the max, or 10%. So you have 10 acres, which is your 10% of 100. You can take off 2 acres per year. So if it works out perfectly, you can get 5 lots. But it's going to happen in 5 different years. It can happen December 30th of conveyance, and then December 2nd conveyance, or January 2nd. Just as the calendar rolls over, you can do 1 and 2. You cannot do 2 per 1 year, or you'll have to pay a rollback on the whole 100 acres for 7 years. So there's another thing to look at. We do a lot of solar work. These solar companies are buying larger tracts of ground to put solar on, and the use is not being approved as a clean and green use. So we have a job in Perry County. A lady had 150 acres. She subdivided all these lots off. They bought one of them. It's 19 acres, and it's not. They have to pay rollback. They said, "Well, pay rollback on 19 acres." No, you're not. You're paying rollback on the whole 140 acres, because what happens is when you convey that lot away, they have to go back 7 years. So it's still going to be part of the taxes of that 140 acres when you go back. Well, what happens is there's a separation time of 7 years. So if they bought the solar farm lot, kept it, and didn't do anything on it for 7 years, now that's a separation of the farm. So now if they violated it, it would only be on that 20 acres. But if they don't go 9 or 7 years, it's not a separation. So you're still applied. Your taxes are still on that 140 acres, which could be a lot of money. It could be 50, 60, 70,000 dollars. It's a lot. So I always recommend that all my clients, before you do something, before you subdivide it, talk to the tax assessment office, get something in writing that if you're doing this, this is what my rollback is going to be, or there's not going to be any rollback. And the good thing about that too is you have it in writing, because a subdivision plan could be sitting at the courthouse for 20 years. And now there's a different tax assessor in there, and he has a different interpretation of what your plan was. So now, if you have it in writing, you can say, "Hey, I was told back then that I was okay, and these are my rollback costs." Now they probably will prorate them somehow because of the 20 years, but so you always get it in writing what that number, that value is going to be. We had just last week a guy called me in York County. He had 13 acres. He said, "I was told that I could take 2 acres off, and I still have 10, so I'm good with clean and green. I did my septic testing. We did all the soil testing for the new lot. We're good to go. Someone told me to call you, do a minute survey and stuff about it. Not a problem." I told him, I said, "Well, you're missing something. Your 10% is 1.3 acres. Your minimum lot size is 2. So he couldn't do it. He can't do it because he's violating clean and green, because he's going over the 10% rule. So now what somebody told him really wasn't true. He really should have went talk to the tax assessment first before he even spent money doing septic test. So now he just spent all that money for nothing to do it. So it's a very tricky, it's very complicated. It's just the tax people are awesome. Cumberland County's awesome. Perry County are awesome. Just call them. They'll sit down with you. They'll tell you exactly. I take a subdivision plan or a sketch plan. They'll tell you exactly what the consequences are going to be. And so it's very important. Next thing I have on here was subdivision as a process that we just talked about. It's not easy. We do a lot of them. I bet you we do 100, 150 subdivisions a year. We do a lot of them. We have about 360 some jobs we do a year, and about 150 of them are subdivisions. And we do a lot of them. And everybody always comes and says, "Well, can we have the settlement in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks?" I'm like, "Come on." I said, "You got to survey it. You got to put a plan together. You got to do septic testing. You got to check site distances. You have to submit a plan to the municipality. And usually you submit ahead of time. So they have 2 meetings. Municipality usually has a planning commission and a supervisor. To be on the agenda for that planning commission, you have to have plans usually submit 30 days in advance. So you're already missing 30 days there. So you're going to have easily 30 days of surveying and doing all the soil testing. And then 30 days of the plan just sitting there ready to let the township review it, then go to the planning commission. If the planning commission has comments, they say, address these and come back next one. You meet once a month. So now you got another 30 days. And then you go to the supervisors, which may not be the next day, because sometimes the township set up where supervisors meet before the planning commission. So now you just went to the planning commission and you gotta go next month to the supervisors. This is kind of weird, but that's just the way it is. And then you gotta get township signatures, record. So 4 or 5 months, easy to do a subdivision. And some people don't like to hear that. You know, it's like some old guys will come and say, well, I remember I just wanted to buy a lot and I just went and had the deed done. Yeah, back before 1968. In 1968, Pennsylvania adopted Pennsylvania Municipality Planning Code that says if you want to change the property line, you got to go through that process. So that's just the way it is. But it is a very intimidating process, and we do a lot of it in meetings. I mean, this past Tuesday we had 7 township meetings in one night. Just the way things go. So I always send my guys; they all go. They're scattered all over the place from the different township meetings. And then I also the stormwater nowadays is terrible. I mean, it's not terrible because it really, I guess, should be done. But, you know, typically when you go over 1,000 square feet of impervious, which an impervious surface is concrete, something water won't go through, 1,000 square feet. And when you go over that threshold, the township's going to tell you need to do a stormwater plan. So you got to hire someone, you can do soil testing, prove how you're going to handle that water so it's not flowing over the property line and affecting your neighbor. And we have had situations where we've worked with other parties, and we were they were the middle person. Like they would say, my client wants to build their house over there, bring a driveway in there. So we actually did that, put a plan together, submitted it, got all the approvals. The owner came in to sign the plan and said, well, I didn't want my house there, I wanted it over here. So I always tell everybody, just have the owner work directly with the engineer, surveyor, so there's no middle party, you know. So we would send them sketches and let them see them and review them. Once it's submitted and reviewed, they've got township fees, township engineering fees, and we got to change it. Oh, they have to do all that again. They have to do it again, and it's really sad when you have to pay twice for something and they weren't even part of making those decisions. So, but pretty good.
You're ahead of schedule.
So, I mean, I give you some other really cool examples of surveying. We talk about these at our Christmas parties a lot. So it's like we have one situation where one of my elder people that I look up to, him and I used to always do surveys in weekends. So we were out surveying, and he was an older guy, gray hair, and he would always, you know, we have metal detectors. I mean, you have metal detectors, you're waving your hands around with this metal detector, looking for pins and stuff. And we were on some Saturday, we were in a development. He was back looking for property corners. I had the instrument set up, and this cop pulls up alongside of me. And he's like, hey, he said, you see this blind man around here? Some lady called, said there was a blind man in his backyard. and she thought he was lost. I'm like, blind man? What are you talking about? Then I'm thinking, oh my gosh. So, because he said he's got a wand, he's just walking around, he's blind. So I said, yeah, come on back here. So we walked around the house, and Richard was back there, and I said, hey, Richard, come over here. And then I said, let me see that metal detector. And then we started, the cop was just there. She was busted. It was funny. But then that same day, the cop left. The same day, Richard got his foot stuck in a groundhog hole and couldn't get out. And I heard him yelling. Then I had to help him get his foot out of the groundhog hole. So just things like that, really, really funny. And up in Halifax, we had a job where one of my friends called me. He says, I want you to come up and mark my property line because my neighbor's dog kennel, I think, is over the line. I said, all right. So I'm up there and surveying. And I said, Dominic, I said, you're absolutely right. I said, here's the line. But I said, that's the least of your concern. He said, why? I said, because the other lot line over here is going through your neighbor's kitchen. What happened was the builder owned 2 lots. It dropped off really hard on ones. He built this house, went to go build the second house, found out it was too steep. So he pulled it back because he owned this lot, never moved the property lines, just built it and sold them that way. So Dominic's line went right through the guy's kitchen. Good. So things happen. Things happen. And they get surveys done when they bought them. So they didn't know. Yeah, and they're not, in Pennsylvania is not required to have a survey whenever you buy a piece of ground. Well, they had to go through the township, move the property lines, get the approval from the townships, and everybody, and unfortunately, this lot got substandard because it ended up not having enough lot width, but everybody pretty much just let it slide because it was already done. You know, so the neighbors they were good. And if you could have a really hostile situation there, that could really get really bad. But it got resolved. They moved the lot line back out of the. But yeah. Do we have any questions? No questions?
Want to talk about driveway permits?
Driveway permits, sure.
Something that happens a good bit.
Yeah, driveway permits. You know, obviously township roads are pretty simple. You go to the municipality and you just apply for a driveway permit and you pay $2,500, whatever it is, and they give you a permit. But you need to make sure that you can see this site visibility left and right. Townships are a little low key. When you get into a state road, now you got to get a state road permit, and they can be a little tough.
You can talk about the one you did for me.
Yeah, so we had basically a situation where we applied for the permit. PennDOT came out. It was an existing lane that went in. PennDOT didn't like it because it was a school bus shelter sitting there, and so they actually made a larger, wider parking area there if they could come in. And PennDOT likes it to be specifically at the spot. You know, it's going to be 24 feet wide maximum, not 100 feet. And they want to control in and out because that's where the safe site is. So we had to grass and seed that area, topsoil it, so there was only one specific spot. Another situation I had in Horse Valley, the guy had 3,000 feet of road frontage, 3,000 feet, 200-acre farm. We applied for a driveway permit on the west end. We come in for a new lot. PennDOT gave him the permit and said, "I want you to sign this access covenant." What they're doing now is they want to restrict the number of access points on these state roads. So they wanted him to sign an access covenant saying he would not ask them for any more driveway permits on 3,000 feet of road. This was an old guy, military. I was glad they didn't tell him that face to face because it wouldn't have been a good situation, because he's like, "I have 3,000 feet of road frontage, Joe. I am not signing that because I want to put up what they want, what they said. Come in here and build another road parallel at your own expense and cut your lots off, and then the way we only have one driveway." It's ridiculous. So we had to go to the powers that be and all this kind of stuff, and finally got approval. We didn't have to do the access covenant, but it is happening all over the place,
Is that why developments, like you go in one and it's just swirl
Yeah,
around?
yeah, yeah.
Must be one.
You know, especially on the state road. Yes. So, well, there's a way to get around it. So we did an 8-lot subdivision up in Perry County, and we knew it was 4 lots on one side of the road, 4 lots on the other side of the road. And we knew that access covenant, the very first driveway permit that we were going to apply, we would have to sign that, which meant we couldn't get any more driveways for those other lots. So what we did was, I told my client, I said, "What you want to do is you want to get the subdivision plan approved and then make a deed up for each parcel." So he went Handmaker LLC 1, Handmaker LLC 2, Handmaker LLC 3, the way up to 8. And they had all these different lots in his name now. So then when we went to get driveway permits, had a separate deed. And when they wanted to do an access covenant, it only applied.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to get that for him. But you got to do it. You got to be smart about it. And PennDOT knew exactly what we were doing. They couldn't do anything because the deeds were already done, recorded, everything. So that was one way for us to get around that. That's right. That's right. Yeah, so, anything else that you're thinking?
Whatever questions they have, other subjects they want to talk about.
So in our contract, we can elect to have property boundaries
Mhm.
looked at as fire due diligence. I've never elected.
Mhm.
Are there any like red flags that might stick out where maybe we could say, hey, this is something to consider? And
Well, I look at it this way. It's $900 for a loan of $300,000, $400,000. it's nothing compared to the price of what you're spending.
Yeah,
And and
because how do you really know? No one would have ever known about that kitchen,
nobody,
you know?
that's right, that's nobody.
So,
Yeah, and that's obviously beyond
Right.
normal, but, a lot of times the fence is over and stuff like that for sure, but.
and how often are tree lines like really, maybe that's a dumb question, but everyone is always commenting,
Yeah.
that tree line must be the property line.
Yeah, I met with a lady in Shermansdale. We did a subdivision for J.C. Smith up in Shermansdale. We marked this property line. I got a call Friday afternoon. We marked it Friday morning from her. She goes, "You got this line wrong." All right, I'll come out and look at it. So I was out there, I looked at it, and it came off the road at a really hard angle. It wasn't perpendicular. It came off a real hard angle. And here she had planted trees at a 90.
Mhm.
Okay, so there was a corner out here that she showed me, which was an original corner and was all good. And the corner that I set, I'm required to put them at the dedicated right of way lines now. So the corner that I set, if you look perpendicular to the road, it was 3 feet over from hers. She's got this off 3 feet. Well, what happened was the property line came such at a hard angle, it was going through both of them. And if you extended both of them to the back line, you could see the corner back there, which I showed her. She said, "What about those trees I planted?" I mean, she was 30 feet over.
Yeah.
She had this hedgerow the whole way down through there. She assumed that it was 90 degrees
Right.
to the road, and she put it in, but it was going right across the neighbor's yard. So it's all a matter of what you think the property line is at the time when you buy it, so.
So there's all kinds of horror stories out there. I have an associate broker that I'm friends with that sold a property. It's 22 acres. That's what it said. That's what they listed it as. Guy buys the property, has it surveyed well after the fact. Turns out it's only 19 acres. Who's at fault? Well, first of all, they didn't have it surveyed. Buyer beware. And according to the deed, it said it was 22 acres,
Yeah.
but they didn't have it surveyed. So the thing is, you got to ask your client, especially if you're buying land, you want to have it
It's
surveyed.
their decision.
Right.
They said you're not required to do it. We had a job in Duncannon, the deed said 10 acres, more or less. More or less. Well, now they're in plain and green, because they have 10 acres, more or less, right? So they had a survey. 9.75. So
Oops.
now they're not eligible for clean and green.
So if they had not, I'm curious, if they had not had a survey, why would more or less?
That's the only documentation out there, they would have been fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bad part was township,
But then that becomes public.
it does. I mean, only if they want to record it. So this situation is kind of weird. They hired us to do it. We gave them the digital information. We showed them what the survey was. They had the decision if they wanted to go. Yeah, so what happened was the neighbor and them didn't get along,
Oh,
okay? So what did he do? He hired a surveyor to come out and survey the lines. And that surveyor determined that they had 9.7 acres and told him. That guy worked for the township, okay? So now he's getting the township involved and say, hey, these people don't have 10 acres. So now it goes to a hearing at the court, up in court, and it was a mess. It was a mess.
He was able to survey the other guys.
Well, when you survey property, so us, when we survey a piece of ground, we're actually not just surveying that one. We're surveying all the neighbors' deeds, because my job is to make sure when I set that pin that my neighbor is supposed to get 150 feet, I'm giving him 150 feet. So I have to survey this way, look for his corners, look this way, look that way, and to make sure that when I'm marking this, I'm giving everybody what they're entitled to have around them. So whenever that surveyor was doing that, he located their corners and told him and said, hey, the guy that you're fighting with doesn't have 10 acres, he's got 9.75. Woohoo! So now he dug his heels in and went the whole way up to the courts with it. That's right. Yeah. And that's another thing too. When you survey a piece of ground and you mark the corners and you move into a piece of ground, the corners are surveyed. You got a survey plot of it. There's not going to be any argument about where the property line is.
Where does that fall in someone's property disclosure though? Like I sold a farm and my people knew that the neighbor's stuff was on their property and they disclosed it. But what if they knew and they didn't disclose it? Did that come back on them?
I don't know the answer legally. I don't know.
That's a Justin question.
Huh?
That's a Justin and an attorney question. Yep.
Used up my allotment. Bring a bottle of champagne.
How long does it take to get so if we have a piece of land that we're selling, buyer, we're writing a contract, we advise them to get a survey. From the time we call you until you're done, what's that timeline? Because we have an inspection or a contingency period that we have to allot on the contract. How much time do you need?
Well, we actually have a full 3 prints that we run every day. So I usually tell people we can be within 10 days, we can be there and have the survey done. So you're welcome. And then usually if it's a hot item that needs to be done, we'll dump it up, get it taken care of.
Mhm. Is there any questions online? Anybody have any questions out in Zoom world? Can't imagine real estate agents have nothing to say.
We're all in shock, but we're trying to absorb all
It is a lot.
Yeah, we went through a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
I couldn't believe I got it done.
this.
So, on our one app, I'm
Yeah.
assuming this is like
Same as that. Yeah,
but when I'm at the location, my location is represented by like a little dot. So I just tell people this is a rough estimate. Let's walk back there and see where we're at.
yeah.
So
So,
it's just
so,
not gonna be exact.
so you're talking about like onyx hunting and apps and all that kind of stuff. The onyx app.
This is just through a home snap.
Okay,
So here's the property, I pull it up and then it marks my location.
right. So
And so when I walk the property, my dot moves,
Yeah,
because that's where
yeah.
I'm at. And so it's helpful a little bit, but it's still.
those property lines are taken from county tax maps.
Right.
So the county
That's what I think.
takes all these tax maps, they create these tax maps, and it's all shared to Google.
Uh-huh.
And all these apps use the same stuff.
Yeah,
So I have a friend of mine, he's a logger. And he uses this Onyx program all the time in the woods. Trying to find property lines and all that kind of stuff. And I had just always busted his chops about it. And because he's like, I called my Onyx surveyor today, and he was telling me where the property line was. It was just comical. So he went out and marked some stuff. And it was actually a property that him and I had bought. He went out and just marked it temporarily. And then we came in and we did the survey, and we found that he was like 100 feet off. He was over on the neighbor 100 feet. And I told him, I said, what does your Onyx surveyor liability insurance look like? I was like, he was just laughing. But what it is if you have a pretty recent subdivision and the tax office was plotting up that geometry on the subdivision and laying it down on the aerial, he can get that pretty close because he's got curb lines to use and street intersections. He can get pretty close. So when you're in more of a recent development, it's probably a lot closer. But if you're out in Perry County on a 100-acre farm and up in the woods, that the deeds call for perches and old stone piles, and they're just very poorly written, the guy sitting at the tax office has nothing to go off of to draw them lines. So that's when it's usually off the line. When you don't have that aerial view to put the deed on, it's not going to be very accurate. So yours is probably within 15, 20 feet, probably.
well,
Yeah,
it's nice
sometimes
to be
it's
able
closer.
to say this is about where it is, or that it's about a picture line, or, you know.
Yeah. And then you're telling them where it's at.
Yeah.
You know, eventually they're gonna say, well, this is about where they get, and put my fence right here. Yeah, but. Anything else?
Any questions out there? Okay. All right, Joe. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time.
Quite welcome.
Everybody has your contact information. You'll probably be getting some phone calls. Joe's kept me out of trouble a couple times, but sometimes not soon enough. So if you have any needs for that, I'd recommend that you recommend that surveyor like Joe to come out if you have land. That's one of the things you can really get in trouble with pins being moved. me personally, I've had that happen to me on my property where a neighbor moved a pin. So it does happen. And don't make that representation. You said about liability insurance. Do you have to carry E&O insurance as a serv? Okay. All right.
It's not cheap.
Yep.
Yeah.
Understood. Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Rick might have a question here, Rick.
I know, I said thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks, Rick. All right, everybody, take care now. See you later.